What's up, guys? Josh Lau here with TheCardGuyz, and welcome to the brand new series here on TheCardGuyz YouTube channel, the A to Z series. We're going to be going over every single hero in the game. Currently, there are 27. This series is going to last through Rosetta, so we're going to include the Rosetta heroes. It's going to be 31 episodes brought to you guys by members of TheCardGuyz. For this very first episode, we are talking Dorinthea. This is not A to Z. We're not starting with Arachne. We're going to go through all the heroes, but we're starting with D. With me today is my good friend and Dorinthea lover, Nixie. What's up, Nixie? Glad to have you here on the very first episode of A to Z.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah. Well, these are, trying times for warriors, and so I thought this would be a very good time to have an expert talk about her. So why don't you tell the people at home a little bit about who you are and how long have you been playing the game and what drew you to Dorinthea?
Sure. I've been playing Dorinthea since middle of Crucible, and since then I
Same.
just enjoy playing her. She's very fun. There's always highs and lows, but I've been sticking with her the whole time. And what initially drew me to her was really just her aesthetics of just a strong knight that could beat up all these other guys, and then also
Yeah.
her mind games of her playstyle just was super fun for me. Each game is like not the same, so you also have
Yep.
to think about how you interact with your opponent, which is very fun for me, and cornerstone of how Flesh and Blood for me should be played.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I hear you. I hear you. Um, do you have any tournament results with Dorinthea? I know that you've top baited a few battle hardens and stuff like that. Have
Mhm.
you played
Yeah,
her to some success?
yeah. So, like you said, I did get top four at Battle Hard in Vegas. I think last year
Mhm.
when there was Starvo, OG Prism, Shane,
Oh
and
god.
Briar still. But that was also
That's
when
pretty crazy.
Glistening was released.
Yeah.
So not
Yeah.
people were like used to fighting against Dorothea with Glistening. So
Hmm.
I was able to,
Yeah.
surprise people with that. Other than that, I also got top eight at the PTI at San Francisco and won some few RTs and
Hmm.
PQs here and there.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. So I know that you produce some YouTube content, and you got a little bit of presence on social media. So we're gonna include those in the description. If you are a Dorinthea fan, you should know who that guy is. So if you don't, well, you're gonna get a very very good lesson from two Dorinthea players here. So on some of these episodes, now I didn't just go to the team and be like, all right, guys, I'm taking the four warriors. You guys do the other 27 heroes, okay? That's not what
Mhm.
happened, okay? But for this episode, I just so happened to be an expert in the hero. The next episode is on Riptide. I don't know jack shit about Riptide, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna still do this interview. So what we plan on doing is we're going to talk a little bit about the style of deck that we currently recommend.
Mhm.
Um, Now, this deck, we did put our brains together and we kind of made it. We're going to release a kind of behind the scenes video, maybe tomorrow, or the day after, where we go through our build process of this deck. But normally, we're going to be just taking the experts build and kind of incorporating it. The reason we didn't do it this time is because Nixie already made a very, very good video on his Battle Hardened Seattle list. So if you want a different style of Dorinthea, you could go check that out. But basically, we're going to go through the list. We're going to talk a little bit about why we picked that style, so instead of hatchets or decimator, and why would we be playing this hero in this current metagame. We'll go through a deck tech. We'll talk a little bit about the main board, the sideboard. We also have some cards in the maybe board. We'll talk about those. We'll go through the strategy of how to play the deck, so how fast we want to go, what are our key cards, how do we use our equipment properly. We're also going to be talking about the strategy against the top meta decks. So, New, Victor, Dash, Zen, KO, etc. We're going to be talking through those. And then I know that there are some people that kind of maybe have some questions like, how do I beat Dorinthea? We're gonna have a section for that too. And then we're
Oh
gonna
no.
kind of wrap things up. so yeah, we're gonna try to have a very very complete and informative episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. So let's start off. Let me start off things by asking you why. So as the people can see at home, we have a Dawnblade Dorinthea deck for them today, and no other weapons in the sideboard. No Decimator Great Axe. Why Dawnblade?
I think people that like Dorinthea, like purists like us, you and I, just love Downblade because of the playstyle that it enables, a lot of mind games and poker aspect. Um, Hatchets is very value oriented and
Mm-hmm.
still very good, but it's very streamlined.
Yep.
And there's a lot of play expression that can be had with that deck. It's just like you find the optimal line. It doesn't matter what your opponent does. I'm gonna push out this much damage, I'm gonna block this much every turn, and just go back and forth.
Yep.
And same with Decimator. You just block as much, maybe swing here and there, and just keep from going. So a new player could pick up both Hatchet and Decimator and probably pilot it to 80%, 90%, 95% efficiency. The
Mm-hmm.
Dawnblade deck, without prior experience, you probably get
Yeah.
50% out of the deck. So
This, yeah, that's something that I think is very very cannot be stated, that playing Dawnblade correctly means you play defense and offense correctly, and you play your opponent correctly.
mhm.
I've always advocated for the first couple turns of the game, poke them a bit, them into different situations, see how they react. And this is why I think both of us played Dorinthea much better IRL instead of on Talishar, is because, well, we don't want to give away all our poker secrets, but there's a lot of
There's a
little
lot of tells that you
there's
get to tell from
timing
how
tells
people
there,
move.
where
Yeah.
their eyes look, where their hands move, and there's differences in, you eventually pick up on what on things, how
Mhm.
stressed they are. I think both of us are kind of a little bit talkative during the game as well. Do they reciprocate talking with us, etc. So and I do agree that Dawnblade is like the purest form of Dorinthea. And I remember at Pro Tour LA when we met, and you were like, "Oh, you're on Dorinthea?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm on Dorinthea." It's like, and then you're like, and I was like, "But I'm on Hatchets," and you're like, "Oh."
Yeah. It's like,
The disappointment
we
in your
yeah,
eyes.
we talked about it right before because you're still debating so much. You're like, should I
Yep,
bring Dawnblade or Hatchet? I'm like,
yep,
I don't know, man. Both are pretty good, but I'll leave
yep,
it to you. And
yep,
your story of how you ended up flipping a coin, and
yep,
then you got the
yep,
Hatchet, but you took it all the way to top eight,
yeah,
so it was worth it. But
yep,
yeah.
yep. Okay, let's talk a little bit about uh why this hero. Maybe we shouldn't talk about why to play this hero in this meta, because currently it's pretty rough, to be honest. But
Mhm.
what would be a favorable meta for Dorinthia, or like a situation where you'd be like, okay, this is a really good dark horse pick?
I think a pretty good dark horse pick for this and like favored meta is where opponent doesn't really want to block too much because they have a lot of offensive power cards.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like with Azalea was like pumps, it's very offensively tuned, but it's defensively very poor. So you're able to race very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then Downblade just does very well at just stacking counters at that point. And then eventually they have to block with their offensive power cards, which does very poorly at blocking.
Yep.
And then you're able to blow up the game there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like the most favored.
Mm-hmm.
And Dory also has a big armor suite, so she has like I don't know, like 8 extra life compared to all the other heroes,
Mm-hmm.
or most of the heroes. I guess Zen now has like 7, but still
Yeah, why do
a
these
lot of
ninjas
armor.
get to run
So
around and pull plates? What's going on?
yeah, what the heck? But I think that's like the most favored meta for her.
Mm-hmm.
There could be other metas for sure where you kind of like take blows back and forth and go a little bit longer running the tunic. Um, but for me, I think one where the opponent doesn't want to block and you eventually force them to block with the Dawnblade, I think is the most favored one.
Sure. Yeah, I generally agree as well. Okay, let's jump into the deck tech now. So, like I said, we kind of designed this together. So,
Mhm.
uh, generally on these episodes, there's just going to be a bunch of questions directed to Nixie, but I think we're going to have a little bit more back and forth on this episode. Okay, let's start off with the equipment. So we have all 7 pieces of equipment shown here. For Dawnblade, this is pretty standard on the boots and the gloves. I guess there's 3 main questions. Is why did we choose just Balance of Justice, no Crown of Providence?
Mm-hmm. Ideally, you do want to run both, but if you had to pick one, the ability for Balance of Justice to deny the spike turns from opponents, and for you to also get like a card advantage at that point, evens out their spike turns. So it makes it not that bad. Providence is just like a one-time thing that could fix your hand. So overall, it's like okay. If you had the sideboard space, I think you should run it. But again, there's not many decks that probably have Arsenal Hate other than Assassins and Command and Conquer Pummels. So I think if you had to run, I think Balance of Justice would be the one.
Yep. I think in the maybe board we did put the Crown of Providence there, so yeah. Okay. Bolters and Bracers, these have been staples of Dawnblade Dorinthea forever. We'll talk a little bit more on how to utilize these when we talk about the main deck. But I guess to keep it short, generally hold your bolters as long as you can. Okay. The other, well, there's 2 more things that we need to talk about. I guess the first thing to talk about is we have Tunic and we have Grains. Why did we go with both?
We went both because Tunic is for the long game that we want to try enable on some of these matchups, and it also allows us to play some 1-cost attack reacts and also defense reactions. So that was important there. And then we had the option of going from Grains or Courage of Bladehold. And Courage of Bladehold is sort of like all in. And you have to be able to end the game really early, or you have to be able to get the massive 3 swings or double swing with Supremacy turn. And if it doesn't line up at the point, you kind of like lose a lot of value with Courage. So because of that, I think Grain overall could still be very good for aggressive purposes, where if you have a blue and you're able to swing twice, you could maybe end up getting 1 to 2 Vigor tokens, and that's pretty much a Courage effect that you have.
Yep. I think this is a very, very solid addition. I do, so two things for Courage of Bladehold that I want to point out. In Blitz, I think this is Courage of Bladehold is much stronger. And also, pertaining to Courage of Bladehold, I think when you play against very high level players, and this is going to be a theme that we talk about, is like you got to change your play style when you're playing against high level players. Is when you flip over Courage of Bladehold against a strong opponent, they're much more likely to keep their armor around, which can be good, can be bad. But basically, when you break Courage of Bladehold, that is the turn where they're either not going to block you at all, or they're going to throw all their armor down to deny you reprise, which means you have to have the Twinning Blade in your hand at that moment, which is hard, right? So, because of that and all the reasons that Nixie talked about, this is what we ended up on. AB1.
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about.
You just need to run 1 at least, but
yeah,
you can
run
more for
Kano
Kano
a tiny bit.
Yeah,
I mean, we do have Oasis in the sideboard, though. To be fair,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean, AB1, AB2, you're dead either way. It really doesn't matter.
Can't do much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Save the sideboard slot, I guess.
Exactly. Just save the sideboard slot. There was a talk about maybe using gloves instead of the hood so that you could run Balance of Justice with the gloves. But here we opted with the hood because having Brave Forge Bracers to make a break point if you ever, get a hit in is pretty important to strip their hand.
Yep.
If they do end up blocking the first swing.
Yeah, if you break through and they blocked, a Brave Forge Bracer activation says, give me your whole hand or I get a counter. Or give me your Tunic, which is, we'll take a Tunic. All right.
Sure.
Okay, so that's the equipment there. Okay, so let's move on to the main deck now. So I guess let's start with the theme or overall strategy of this deck compared to other decks. So I guess the giveaway card is this one here.
The Rainbow Valors, you're right.
Yes, and no glistening steel blade. Why don't you talk through a little bit on that?
Yeah. So Glistening Steelblade is a very strong card with a natural go again, but the lack of front pump definitely hurts it. And current meta right now, there's just a lot of armor block, so it's really hard for it to get value if they just armor block it. It doesn't turn on reprise, so you can't get singing to twinning. And so because of that, we felt my I mean, I had a natural go again list that employed it, which had, a lot of natural go agains with attack actions to follow up if they overblock. So that was like my battle hard in Seattle list. But here we wanted to employ more of the classic Dorinthea playstyle where I'm gonna present a lot of value on hitting. And if I hit, I get to swing again and get counters and so much benefits.
Mhm.
And by incentivize them to block, it turns on your prize, it turns on your attack reactions, so this is trying to force them to block, and if they don't block, that's fine too, because we'll end up just getting a counter anyway.
Mhm. Yep. By having Warrior's Valor plus Spoils of War plus Bolters, we generally have enough go again. We also have a couple lead with speeds that, and obviously our blues supplement that as well. So go again is not really an issue with this deck. Okay, let's start with the attack reacts, and then we'll move on from there. So we have 3 Blade Flurries, we have 2 Ironsong response, we have another one in the sideboard that often comes in. These are just the best 0 cost stuff. I mean, this is exactly the type of hands you want to play. Yellow or red Valor, a blue, and this makes for a very functional hand. These are great arsenal targets, and getting over by just one it's often enough.
Just need one.
Yep. So that's why they're there. I think not too much to discuss about these. Just keep in mind that you want to put these into arsenal generally if you can, because they synergize with a lot of things in your deck. Because if we have a hand without go again, well, we can just fix it with this. If we have a hand without a pump, that's a little bit more dicey, right? Okay, we also have, so going up the resource curve, we have Puncture. Talk to me a little bit about why we put this card in.
It's almost good as Blade Flurry. It's instead of 0 for 4, this is a 1 for 4 potentially if they armor block. And right now there's a lot of armor going around to be blocking with. So just a 1 for 4 when people overblock by 3 and just be able to go over by that extra 1 is very important.
Yep.
So I think it's the currently strongest 1 for 3 card that we have. I think.
It is unconditional, which is great. And if we have Reprise, it goes Singing Steelblade into Puncture, that insulates us against sync
D-reacts.
if they have, assuming they blocked with armor. Right? Okay. Moving up the cost curve. So we'll talk about Singing Steelblade and 20 Blade later. They are attack reacts, but they have special use cases. Okay, so moving up the cost curve a little bit, we have Route.
Don't leave home without at least one route.
You always play one. Sometimes you play 2. That's just the way to do it.
It's the blowout card. You need at least one of this. Same with twinning.
Yep, this is great at the very, very beginning of the game. This is also great at the very, very end of the game. The only thing to say about it is make sure you keep track of your kills. If you know, you know. All right, we got 2 copies of Overpower. We got a red and a yellow. We were kind of debating to add maybe 1 more Overpower, but ultimately we landed on 2. Talk to me a little bit about, why we went with this 1-1 split on the red and yellow.
Sure. Since this deck is about hitting, and we have a lot of blues in our deck now, so we most likely will be able to play Overpower at the end game too, or even a little bit in the mid game. Red is always very good. 3 for 6. It's very nice as an attack react as long as they block from hand. But sometimes red could be overkill. So we added 1 yellow because that's 3 for 5. And again, 5 is the magic number you want to go over D reacts. So if they, perfect block, they sink below to go up by 4, then you overpower to 5, you go over by that 1 damage. It's very important. So just having a split of 1 red and 1 yellow, I think helps out the curve.
Mhm. This card is extremely important from a strategical sense because if they know you don't have overpower, and you don't have unconditional go again, they know that if they overblock by 3 or 4, that's going to get the job done. And overpower says, you know what, you could try that, and if I have the blue plus the overpower in hand, you basically lose the game at that point. If you try to stop Dorinthea by overblocking and she still gets through, I think your win rate is 80-90% plus generally in that situation, because if they're desperate enough to overblock and you still get through.
That's most likely the case when you have like a 1 or 2 counters already, so they are trying to overblock to reset, and then you're able to go over. It's pretty much seals the game because they have to try again the next turn, and they lost a lot of tempo.
Yep, exactly. Okay. So in terms of attack reacts, let's move down to the yellows, and then we'll talk about a couple of the blues. So we got a copy of Run Through. You mentioned how this is very important against Azalea. Why don't you tell the people about that?
Yeah, Azalea just doesn't want to block, so you could just have 2 card of just swing with the Dawnblade, run through, then swing again to get a counter very easily. It's also good because with Azalea around, a lot of people are countering it by playing Warmongers. So all these front pumps of Valor won't be able to be played. So you do need some attack reacts that give you go again in that window. So 1 copy of Run Through helps out with that.
Yep.
But you don't want too many, because if they block, then you can't really do anything with it.
Yep. Some metagames I could see you running 2, but I think in this metagame, 1 feels pretty good. Okay. Singing Steelblade. Oh boy. This is one of the most defining cards and one of the hardest cards to use, because if they don't block, this card becomes actually less bad, because now that we have grains, like, okay, you didn't block, brace or grain swing, whatever. But Singing Steelblade, in order to really punish people with Singing Steelblade, you have to understand the deck composition and the opponent's tendencies and how they like to block, right? Exactly. Some of the best targets for Singing Steelblade, if they block exact and you think they don't have a D-react, Singing Steelblade into Glint, assuming you didn't have Go Again, is really good. Singing Steelblade into Twinning Blade, which we're going to talk about next, is obviously very good if you have Spoils of War or Agility tokens. And also simply Singing Steelblade into, depending on your resource curve, into the 0 cost or into the 1 cost. Both are good.
Yep. Sometimes also, like, even if they reprise and you feel like they have a D-Rack, just going over by 1 by itself and not finding anything, or fail to find, so then you go over by 1, is still okay too.
Yeah, that's a very, very advanced technique, but I'm glad you mentioned it. There's also another technique when you think they do have the D-React and you have the resources. You can Singing into Ironsong response. So, yep. That's why you guys come here for these episodes, because of the little nuggets like that.
Little tips and tricks.
Little tips and tricks there. Okay, so speaking of tips and tricks, I know that this is your favorite card.
Yep.
Good old Twinning Blade. This was printed in Crew when we both started, and this was the cornerstone of our offense. Because, but we only have 1 copy, so I think this warrants some explanation.
Sure. I think 1 is always a must-have. You need at least 1 to be able to close out games when you have 1 or 2 counters at the end of the game and opponent full blocks, and you have a go again with like a glint or from spoils, and you play Twinning to just seal the game there. So you always want 1. 2, I think normally I would like to run 2 too, but this deck currently doesn't have that much natural go against. So at that point, Twinning doesn't do as much. So being at 2 copies could be good, but kind of a luxury at this point. There is a case maybe you take something out to put this second copy in,
Mhm.
but I think one is for sure needed at the moment.
And because we have just one copy, we are going to protect this single copy with our we're not with
Yep.
our lives, but we really need this as an
Yeah, you better be
option.
pitching that for a
Yes,
while
you
for
better
the
be
end
pitching
game.
this twinning blade, guys. Okay.
Yep. And
Okay.
then every time you pitch it, opponent still know you're just on 1-2, so
Yeah,
they might think you're
that's the
on the
thing
full
is they
3.
don't know how many you're on. And that's the theme here is like we could be on 2 route. We could be on 2 twinning blades. We could be on multiple Ironsong Deter editions. We could be on multiple run throughs. We could be on multiple emboldened blades. They don't know, right? So, okay. Well, speaking of glint, this is the other attack reaction in the deck. This gets, I guess the only thing to really say about this is this gets much better the later in the game. So, generally, I would not rely on this for go again in the early to mid game because they'll just deny reprise. So I'd generally just use this as a resource card or block with it. But late game, this is really, really good.
Yep. Also, early game, most of the time, if they're blocking, they have D-reacts, so playing Glint probably will end up getting stuff with a D-react,
Yep.
so it's not really useful.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a twinning, you don't really want to waste it that early, because again, you want to save that for end game,
Yep.
so not as useful early.
Yep. Yep. Good point. Good point. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the threats of the deck now, and then we'll get into the sideboard. So commanding performance, lead with speed. You notice there's no sharpened steel in this deck list. This is a card that, with the style of deck that we're on, I think can be quite good.
Yeah,
How have you found
I
this card?
think I think it's been pretty standout for me. Being able to, force them to not block, even though you have like no cards left. Being able to play Warrior's Valor into commanding performance and then swing with like a tunic up. Your opponent's like, well, I see you presenting 9 damage, but I can't really stop it with my attack action hand because I don't want to blow up my arsenal. So I guess I just let this through.
Yep. And this synergizes very well. I know you mentioned Tunic, but like if you have a Vigor token sitting around, then that play is also available to you. So
Yep.
this is a card that you kind of want to time it a little bit if you can with a Vigor token, or I guess well, there's really no zero cost go again other than hit and run and glint, but maybe time it with an agility token from lead with speed or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, agility token with that's very nice.
Yeah.
But you never just want to play commanding performance just by itself and just swing,
Correct.
because that's just vanilla 6 damage that people would just take any day.
Mhm.
So
Yes, you need the threat of supremacy bolters or the threat of valor would be the way to do that. Okay, let's talk about lead with speed. This is a new card from Heavy Hitters. Been performing pretty well.
It has. Initially, when I first saw this, I thought it was like not that great because it's a 2 block. But after playing with it, just the ability to generate an agility token is very nice, just for the natural go again. As well as if you swing with the blue and play this, coming for 6 damage. And now you have an on hit if you have grains, because if you hit, that last resource could be converted to vigor. So it then much turns into like a goblet, where
goblet
I
at
hit
home
for 6 damage, I get a vigor and I get a agility token. That's so good.
Sure. Okay. The other non-go again pre-pump is good old Steel Blade Supremacy. This is a card that needs support because it is so threatening. If you don't have support, it's just going to get blocked. So, combines well with Bolters, combines well with Dominate, combines well with Singing Steel Blade, combines well with Warrior's Valor. It combines well with every card of the deck. But what I mean by support is you got to keep your hand generally to attack with this card. This card gets
definitely
weaker in the late game. This is good in the early mid game because this card will get their armor. It will cause an overblock. It will swing tempo, or it'll just do a bunch of damage. So, no matter which way you slice it, this card is great.
Yeah. Do you want to explain why it's not that good late game?
I mean, if you don't attack twice with Dawnblade, this is a overcosted yellow sharpened steel.
Yeah.
So you really want to make sure that your attack hits. And you basically, after you use your bolters, the situations where you could play a supremacy for max value is really reduced. That's why at the beginning I said you gotta really conserve your bolters in general. So yeah, that once you get to the late game, you can't keep full card grips, and yeah, it's just
Yeah, exactly. Especially like you said, if you lose bolters, the power of this card goes down quite a bit because you're not threatening anything if you even get a Han hit. Because the value comes from swinging twice with this card.
Yep. All right, Warrior's Valor, very similar to Supremacy. It combines well with a lot of cards in this deck, and it's the bread and butter of this deck. We talked about that at the beginning already. Ironsong Determination. We got a single copy just to eat up armor a little bit, make them a little bit scared that, another one is coming. It makes people a little bit more hesitant to drop to very low single digits as well. It's just an all-around good card.
I think that's another card you probably want to save till the very end, if you can, to mid to late game when they're out of armor, to be able to swing twice with bolters and supremacy or something like that.
Very similar to Twinning Blade. Try to pitch this card if possible. Okay, I guess we got these three down here that we haven't talked about. Hit and Run is just a good blue. Blocks 3. Who cares if New plays this? It's fine. Precision Press, very similar to Hit and Run, just providing a little bit extra go again. And then finally we got 2 copies of Hold the Line, just a very good meta pick and increases our defense against New by a little bit.
And again, helps against KO, so it's very good.
KOs
and I guess one Emboldened Blade just for just to have to opponents guess, if you have more and make them hesitant of putting a D-React in arsenal.
This is also one of the most fun cards to play because
it is.
It's like we're really playing poker. Let me gamble a whole card that you have a D-React in your arsenal.
Like, how well did I read you?
How well did I read you? And if you the best feeling in the world is hitting a red unmovable. Very few things can replace that. Okay, so we talked about the main deck. So for those of you who've been, watching the Card Guys for a while, you guys know that I like to organize my main deck as in like I play every single card here in every single matchup, pretty much. Maybe there's 1 or 2 matchups where I don't, but in general, the deck is the main deck. And over here we have the sideboard. And in most matchups, we bring in 7. Sometimes we fat deck, but let's just run through the sideboard and then we'll get on to strategy. So our sideboard consists of these cards. I guess I'll start with the defensive suite. So we have Oasis for Kano. Also, if we're fat decking with Tunic, we'll bring that in. Sink Below, just a generally good card. Also, I think Dorinthea hands are often like just good, but if you sink something, you can often turn it into a great hand. And also when you have tempo or have a counter, Sink Below can help you there. Why don't you talk a little bit about the shunts? Because Blue Shunt is a card that I actually haven't been playing too much of, but I do remember it being, the OG like part of the energy base. So talk to us a little bit about Shunt.
So since we are on Tunic, and we're pretty much going to bring the Shunts in for the Tunic matchups most of the time, just being 1 for 4 or 1 for 6 is very good. But on top of that, if it's like a weapon, then you have your own like reckless swing at home with it to steal games with. So it's very nice for that. Just being able to block a really big attack with 1 for 6 is just pretty strong. I think there's not many other D-Reacts that could do that. So
yeah, Steelblade Shunt is a pretty unique D-React in that like it combines really good with Tunic. Like, I mean, this is a WTR thing. It was printed there for a reason. But yeah, it's so in a lot of matchups, we'll be bringing in Shunt or Epot. It kind of depends whether we go first or second. So if you go first, you generally try to put down an Epot. If you're going second, then you just want a little bit more consistent defense. Okay, so that's the defensive cards. I guess technically Snag is also a defensive card. This comes in against New. Maybe you bring it in against Guardian as well, because it's quite good against Create a Conquer Pummel.
Yep. It's also good against Rouse. It turns off Rouse to be a 0 attack.
Yep.
So that's really nice there.
Pretty solid there.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the defensive cards. Offensive cards, we got, well, pretty much everything else. Command and
Hmm.
Conquer, this is a popper. This makes our attack pattern a little bit more ambiguous. This is not a card we play in that many matchups. This is, uh, yeah, I guess this is more for like a few of the Codex matchups and maybe popper in general. Because
Popper, and
we're
also
very
if you
heavy
if you're going
focus.
long, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not relying on getting counters early and keeping them, then Command and Conquer is nice to steal
Yep.
some tempo. But if you're racing, then you don't really want it because they could clump up your hand.
Yes, exactly. Okay, Ironsong Pride single copy, mainly because we don't want to draw two of these at the same time. A single
Mhm.
copy of Ironsong Pride is Chef's Kiss. It's the spice that makes the deck. Uh,
Yep.
increases the clock on your weapon, and like we said before, going over by one often gets the job done. We got Ironsong Response sitting in the sideboard because sometimes you don't want to. Because if we look at our deck, if you draw an Ironsong Response and or a Sitting Steelblade at the same time, that can make your hand really bricky against certain decks. So we do put, just for math reasons, we put the Ironsong Response in the side. And then finally we got good old Chorus of Ironsong, mainly used as a one of against Enigma, or when we're fat decking,
Mhm.
we could put this in.
Yep.
I know we used to be running on 3, but I think
Yeah.
we both realized that this is
It
less
doesn't
good than
really
we
like
thought.
help too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
If the Enigma is playing a lot of D reacts, it doesn't do too much because they'll just cover it with
Mhm.
the D react. But
Yep.
having one for the potential blowout with a singing tutor is
Yep.
very nice.
Sure.
And also, if you're fat decking, if you block with another card, you could come in with maybe a CNC for 7
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, which is
Yep.
pretty backbreaking.
Yep.
So,
Very, very good. Okay. We have a couple cards in the maybe section, but I will leave that for the other video. You guys can watch that to hear our discussion on that. I don't want to keep this, I don't want to make this video too long. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our general strategy. I know that we've talked about that a little bit already, but let's talk about, let's first talk about game speed and game length. How fast do we want to go with this deck? What do you think,
mhm.
Nixie?
Well, I guess matchups, right? Like, are you fighting Zen, who doesn't want
That's
to
what it
block and
is,
want to
basically.
end the game soon? Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what kind of tells you, like, if you want a game to go along, bring in the tunic and the shunts. If not, you're gonna bring in the grains and then maybe the epos or something, and hopefully be able to race them.
Mhm. Yep. That's I completely agree with you. So another thing I wrote down on our notes is that I think Dorinthea is one of the decks that really utilizes life total and equipment in one of the best ways. I'm sure you've experienced this many times, that you've dropped down to 1 health and then just killed them, because you they push damage, you drop to 1, you get to keep 4 or 5 cards, and they never get another turn after that. Because the way Dorinthea operates is kind of like Kano. We kind of get to take half an extra turn. If you don't get cards from our hand, and we get to keep 5 cards, then you have to give us you have to overblock.
Mhm.
And the equipment usage is also, I mean, we talked a little bit about this already, that like you really want to hold your bolters. In general, you probably use Balance of Justice ASAP, because the matchups where you're using Balance of Justice, you want to have your big power turns before you have to get into that late game situations. Um, yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts on like using life totals or anything like that?
No, I think you said it very well. Like, usually with armor, you kind of save, but with balance, you do sort of want to be incentivized to use it early against like K or Zen. So
Mm-hmm.
you could pop it whenever they plush their Art of Wars or Blood Rush Bellows. So you could even out the spike churns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, going down to like single digits is fine. Um, Especially if you could threaten and strip their hand next turn, because the opponents are probably also in single digits at that point and they have to keep on overblocking every single time, which allows you to hopefully maybe
Mm-hmm.
arsenal card for the next turn.
And
So
this is where the Brave and Brave Forge Bracers really comes in, because often in that situation that we just described, you go down to very low single digits, but you have counters on Dawnblade, and you have a 5-card hand, and that's where it's like, okay, I know we don't have Shift the Tide of Battle, but Brave Forge, Brave,
Yep.
Vuri, and Shifting the Tide of Battle, all very thematic things for that Dorinthea does. Okay, so I guess in terms of power cards, which cards would you like never really want to block with? I think that's kind of a
Definitely
trick question for this deck, but
yeah,
I
the
think as
single
warriors
cards for
were,
sure.
I think as yeah, the Twinning Blade and the Determination
Route.
are generally you want to pitch them. Obviously, Steelblade Supremacy is a card that you want to hold on to. But
Mhm.
I mean, as the beautiful thing about Dory is that, like, if sometimes you're like, okay, that turn is just ridiculous. Let's just lay the hand down, move on
Yep.
with life.
Which is totally fine. You
Yeah,
just save 12 health. Yeah,
yeah,
every time when I play with Dory, I don't think of I have 40 life. I think of I have 40 life plus a lot more because of each of my cards are lives too, right?
yes, you could
So
drag the game
60
out a very
cards
long
plus
time.
like 3 health each, right? So it's quite a bit of life that your opponent has to go through. And each turn, you could just be threatening a counter with a go against source with a Dawnblade, and that's all you need. And the opponent either has to still give you 2
Mhm,
cards to block it, or just let it through and let you have a
mhm.
counter.
That is a very, very, very good point. The hand selection is actually one of the hardest things for Dorinthea players to get a grasp of, because oftentimes you draw a hand and you're like, "This is I could play this hand," and then when you or I
Yeah.
look at this hand, we're like, "No, don't do it. Just block
Yeah.
it."
Yeah, a
So
lot of people be like, "Oh no, I could like use up all my hands, right? That's why you don't do flesh, but like use up my
yeah,
hand, right?
yeah,
So I could like take this damage and throw out like good damage. It's like no, sometimes even though doing less damage, you're doing more because you're saving life to be able to do power
yeah,
turns later on, or
exactly.
you're able to pitch your power cards for end game. So
Yep,
yeah.
yep. Wise words there from Nixie. Okay, I guess the only other like kind of like advanced technique that might be relevant is a mid-game pivot from trying to kill them with Dawnblade to trying to run them out of cards. This is a strategy that is available very rarely, but once in a while, like against a boost dash that doesn't have a pounder in, or doesn't have a induction chamber in play,
Mhm.
maybe against, yeah, it's really the only one that's jumping out at me. Generally, you don't pivot with this deck list, but
Yeah.
there certain heroes can do that.
Yeah.
Notably
You
more
definitely could
on the
do that with like different, times of the game because sometimes you get a counter, so you do want to be a little bit greedy and
Mhm.
take a bit more damage on your life to be able to try preserve that
Yes.
counter.
Mhm.
But you don't want to sometimes like fully commit because it's still probably early on in the game unless you're fighting Zen or something. You really want to keep the counters.
Mhm.
Um, so you could just like have them like overblock and be like, all right, I'm gonna keep this one extra card that wasn't I was gonna play it anyway to like arsenal for like a power turn next turn.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
yes, being able to throttle
Mhm.
and understanding the state of the game is very important.
Okay. Okay. Next section now is we're gonna briefly talk about the how to play this deck against the top decks, and I think by covering these 8 heroes, we're going to give you all the information that you need to play against a lot of the other heroes, because there are several. Just looking at these 8 heroes here, we got Zen, New, Victor, Dash, Azalea, Enigma, Ko, Kano. These actually play radically different. We got our
Mhm.
aggro in like Zen and Victor. We have disruption in New and Victor. We got like setup in Dash. We got aggressive disruption in Azalea. We got Enigma, which is like completely different. We got Kato, which is completely different. And then we got KO, which is like a value deck. So uh, if you can play these at 8 matchups, I have great confidence the other 19 are not going to be issues for you. So let's start off by talking about Zen. So how would you like to play against Zen? So before we jump into that, so we did make 4 of the matchups. So let's just, I guess, pull that up. We are going to
Mhm.
have a full sideboard guide with like I'm going to add a bunch of matchups here after this video. I'm going to have that available on our Patreon. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, check that out. So I pulled up the Zen, so you can see like how we arrange the cards. But let's just talk general strategy and tactics against Zen. Uh,
Yeah.
we are recording this the 17th of July, so the Bonds ban has come into effect, and we've seen a little bit of a shift in how they typically build their decks. So why don't you break down how you like to play against Zen?
Yeah. So Zen is still very strong. It's very aggro. Just a lot more of the tiger baselines now.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, even though they have only 3 bonds, it's like a majestic now. Still able to fetch things and do a lot of crazy things with it. So you still have to race. So we have to go down to clean 60. So you see your power cards much sooner. And you are racing with instead of tunic, you're using grains. And yeah, just trying to get your counters as soon as possible.
Mhm. Yep, and you can see that we included the sink below. This is mainly just used to filter our hands, so it turns a little bit smoother. Obviously, the grains helps with the smoothness as well. Um, Occasionally, this can stop a tiger swipe or
Hmm.
the attack react. But yeah, it's
Maul, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
Maul. Yep, Maul is the name of that. But yeah, pretty straightforward. Yep, just you're just racing. I mean,
Yeah. This one is a
it's
race.
this one's just a race.
Yeah.
Commanding performance does is I guess kind of a standout card against ninjas in general. It makes it very hard for them to block
Hmm.
when you
I
place
guess
it
Zanny
down.
might not be as good because they might just be like, I'm just gonna throw armor anyway.
Yep.
So they're not really blocking. But
Hmm.
still, if they do want to block because you are at like 2 or 3 counters, it makes it really hard for them.
Hmm. Yep. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about new.
Hmm.
So I know that this is actually one of the hardest matchups for Dorinthea, mainly because uh, if new takes cards from your hand, it's very very hard to push damage, and because of that, uh, Nixie has developed the fat stack strategy for this matchup. Why don't you tell them a little bit about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. Personally, for me, I feel like assassins, I always approach it as like another like attack reaction like interactive game, and they're gonna
So
be
kind of like
taking
a
cards
Dory
out of your
mirror,
deck. Yeah,
a
exactly. And in
mean
that one
Dory
you do
mirror.
want to
Yeah.
be fast stacking. So that's
Mhm.
why I approach it with a fast stack mentality. I'm not trying to like race and get counters, which some people might want to do that, which could work for them. But personally, for me, I like to take it slow. Make sure that I'm like swinging a Dawnblade or maybe presenting a go again, stripping a card from them. If not, have a D-Rack ready with like a shunt, sinks, or maybe a snag to be able to like deny their turn,
Mhm.
and then prevent them from banishing cards, and then going back and forth from there. And usually, the news that I've been playing with mostly aren't trying to fatigue you. They are trying to push out damage.
Mhm.
They're not built for the fatigue, so you could end up just fatiguing them when they only have like the chi left in their deck, like
Mhm.
6 or 7 of them at the end. So you could then, at that point, they can't block your go against swings anymore,
Mhm.
and then you just rack up counters then.
Yep. I will add that this is a knowledge-based matchup. You need to know what you need to know that Just a Nick exists. You need to know that Hiss exists. You need to know that Fang Strike exists. And you need to, you know what Leave No Witnesses does. You need to know what Surgical Extraction does. All the
Hmm.
contract cards, all the
Yeah.
stealth cards and stuff.
You
Uh,
got to be ready for like, are they going to play the Siren's Call because how they attacked or blocked, or are they
yeah,
going to use their mask here? So,
yeah. There's a lot of interactivity in that, and that's a matchup where if you play it more, you'll get better at it.
mhm.
Okay, let's talk about I guess Azalea and Care, the others that we prepared. So let's talk about Azalea. So as you can see, we're running clean 60 and we have no tunic, and we didn't bring any of our defensive cards in because we're
Going
racing.
second. Yep. We're gonna cross our fingers and hope that they don't draw a knock with a pump in the very beginning,
Yep,
and that we could just like block any like dominated arrow if they throw one that's like not that devastating, and just go
yep,
to the races from our beginning of the turn.
yep. I guess armor usage is very, very important in this matchup. So the most threatening thing is red in the ledger because we have a lot of front pumps. So
Mhm.
if in general you're gonna let every other arrow just hit, um,
Yep.
and you're going to
One of the other
save
ones
your
maybe
armor
like
for
bolt
a
and
bit.
shot. No, not bolt and shot. Which one's the battering bolt? That one.
Yeah,
That
battering
one.
bolt. That is a
Yep.
card that I've been playing so much Bolton recently that I forgot that card exists.
Yeah.
Yes, battering bolt is very good against Dorinthea because obviously it would
Yep.
strip all your attack reactions. Okay, so yeah, just a race. I guess the final matchup that we have prepared for you guys is KO.
Yep.
So this is actually, Warrior versus Brute is actually, a classic battle. It's actually a pretty back and forth affair. And why don't you talk to me a little bit about KO and how do you approach that matchup?
Yeah. KO is like a very aggro deck, but it's also very value oriented. So like Ira with all like the +1 damage
Oh
plus
man,
X
Ira.
damage with
Yeah,
Gogans.
yeah.
It's just
It's Ira.
yeah. So it's very strong, and they also have a lot of 3 blocks. They have a lot of equipment, but
They
they
have
also have a lot
Scowling
of no
Fleshbag.
blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, Scouting Fleshbag
Yeah.
is a really strong card. We do have Ironsong Pride to maybe play around that to be able to play that instant speed to go around it, which is very cool. But yeah, this one is also a race matchup, and eventually they're gonna have a hand that can't block because they have a lot of Bear Fangs, Wild Rides, and they use up a lot of the
Pulping.
equipment, and then pulping, and you're able to get that like 1 or 2 counters, and then they start sweating and they just try to race at that point. But hopefully, when you're at 2 counters, you're pretty much ahead, so they can't stop you, and you're able to keep on racking up counters, and you pretty much steal the game from then.
Yep. I guess some very specific things that I could add is that you want to stick your attack reaction into Arsenal. You don't want to be relying on an attack reaction from hand because that can get stuffed by the fleshbag. Okay. Okay, we don't have this matchup prepared for you guys, but we can talk in generality. So Victor, one of the hardest matchups actually, and that's just because Guardians are good. Not because he has a billion D-reacts. Often they have no D-reacts. It's just we can't win wagers and Guardian value good.
Yeah, and a lot of disruptions, right? And
Yeah,
big attacks. So strip cards from our deck. So yeah, how do you like to approach this matchup? Personally, for me, I used to fat deck against Victor, but with Cast Homes now, it's much harder to be able to
I
just fat
think
deck
you
and
got to
go.
go real fast. The
Yeah,
longer the game goes, you basically don't want them to be able to play all their tested strengths, all their trounces, because
you lose every
we're
single one of
gonna
those.
lose every single one of these. So I think you got to go real quick, and just get a little lucky. I think if you got a really clutch sink below or snag, that could definitely turn things, because they might overextend a little bit. And I think you gotta play like you gotta assume that the victor's on just sink below or none.
Yep.
You'll figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, if you're on staunches, you're gonna be in a very
You're
rough
gonna
time.
lose
But
if
yeah,
they're on
yeah,
staunch. You just lose. But
yep.
in general, I think current builds may even cut sink. So we'll
I
see.
think so. I think currently they're on the Gulligan package to fight
Yes,
against
which
the
is like
news
15
and
sideboard cards.
Enigmas.
Yeah.
Right. So they can't afford the D
Yeah. So
reacts.
we may not like illusionists, but we thank them for keeping guardians in check a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about Dash. Dash is she's getting close to living legend. She's always been kind of there. I mean, Nixie, we've been playing since crew. We played
Yeah.
Dory versus Pistol Dash, Pistol Chamber Dash. God knows how many times at this point. I guess the main
Oh
thing is
boy.
just
Yeah.
you don't block.
No, you don't want to block at all.
You keep attacking, and you just realize, oh, they have Sync Fate and 3 unmovables. Let's go.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. You don't want to block, even though only reason is if you have a really unplayable hand, then sure. But yeah, I think that one you just want to race before they set up their Exodia deck with all their pistols and everything. And here, I think commanding performance does a lot of work. I wish
Yeah.
I could fit a remembrance in here because I would love to get that back because they're going to be blocking with their attack actions a lot. So being able to play commanding performance to deny them from blocking is
And this
very
can blow
big.
up a D-React that they set up. One of those precious 9s that they set
Exactly.
up. Yeah.
Yep.
If they're playing
So
aggro into you, you kind of just play this like KO. Like the only disruption that they might have would be Pulse Wave, and yeah, generally that's
and even
not
then
that
it's fine.
because
Yeah,
normally you
because
just
he just
reveal
still
3.
reacts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You
And if
just have
show
to.
reacts, they don't strip anything
Yep, exactly.
because they only strip action cards. So.
Mhm. Yep. Okay. Let's talk about. Okay, so we saved the two special ones for last. Enigma. So
Mm,
this is a pretty challenging matchup because they often have a lot of defensive cards. Our stuff, our if Dawnblade doesn't hit, then our hero ability doesn't trigger. This is, a little bit tough.
yeah.
General thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think this deck did sacrifice points into Enigma because we're not running things like Bambrace. We're not running a lot of attack reacts to follow up stuff go against. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think it wasn't really that great of a matchup to begin with. It was
Mhm.
probably like a 15% matchup.
Yep.
And then running Bambrace and more attack reaction maybe brings up to like 25-30%.
Yep.
Even then, it's not that favored. So yeah, this one will be very hard. I don't think you could go aggro. You have to go with the value with Tunic and Shunts, and hopefully your Shunts is able to stop their attacking um, board aura,
Yep.
and you just get to pop it.
Yeah, having Tunic Shunt and having a single copy of Chorus of Ironsong does mean they have to play a little bit carefully. If they play a
Mhm.
little recklessly, you can punish them pretty badly. But in general, this matchup is going to be hard because dealing 40 damage to a hero that denies reprise all the time is tough. Okay,
Yep.
finally, we have Kano. Uh,
Mhm.
this one is, I think, fairly straightforward. You try to draw one of your oasises and
Yeah.
poke him with the pointy end until they
Yeah,
die.
yeah, pretty much trying to get your counters as soon as possible before they kindle or kill you.
Yep.
I think at Battle Hardened Seattle, I guess I played against Peter Budensick and my last round, and then I think he killed me turn 1.5 because he threw like a spindle at me, and then I attacked, unloaded my hand, and he had like a already wildfire and arsenal, so just killed me there. I'm like,
Oh, jeez.
that was
Well,
a 3 minute game.
yep.
And I didn't draw
I mean,
Oasis, so
Kanos can do that, so
yep,
that is a thing.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I hope that you guys got a little bit of a taste about how to pilot Dorinthea against the different meta decks. Okay. Now, we're gonna include a section in all of these 31 videos because we don't want
Hmm.
these videos just to be about people that want to learn Dorinthea or learn a hero. We want to
Hmm.
be able to give you guys some insight on how to play against this hero. Now,
Oh
Nixie,
no.
you and I we're gonna betray our friends a little bit for a second, but
Yeah.
okay, but I mean, we were joking earlier that, well, when we came to this point, it's like, well, just get good.
Yeah.
That's really the counter to Dorinthea is if you. I cannot remember the last time I lost a Dorinthea to a
Mirror.
Dorinthea just as Milton or
Yeah.
whatever, like, because when you IRL, I've lost on Talishar many a times, but
Yeah.
in IRL matches, like, once you understand how to play Dorinthea, you can, and you understand the tree. It's like, okay, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. Based on what they did, I can determine it's probably this. Therefore, I should do this.
Yep.
It becomes really really hard.
Yeah.
And I yeah, I don't know if you have any more specific tips, but the number one
No.
tip is just get good and understand the card
No
pool, understand how
knowledge
to
check
play the
for
deck. Yeah,
sure.
it's a knowledge
Yeah,
check.
like being
Yeah.
able to understand, like, okay, like I saw you play Supremacy, but you only have one card or two cards, like you don't have Go again. Thinking about it, like if he plays Pop Bolters, that's fine. That's one big threat out of the way, so I could just like then
Yes.
dump my hand on the second swing,
Yes.
and
Yes.
like I got
That
you to pop your Bolters. That's so good for me. So,
understanding the
um,
threat level of an attack is the most important thing. Now that you
mhm,
mentioned that, some things look scary. Like sometimes it's like, oh, you played Warriors Valor and swung, and you don't have counters, you don't have Supremacy active. I have a life lead, and I have a good hand. Why would you block that?
exactly.
So, uh, understanding the threat level and how the decks interact is quite important because
Hmm.
Dorinthea, at its core, is an interactive deck. So,
Yep.
understanding how she wants to interact with you is also very, very
Yeah.
important.
understanding how like punishing it could be, because like even if they get one counter, it is just one counter. It does cause break points, but if you feel like you're able to push out a lot of damage with your cards because you're able to go wide or something, push it, you know, take out a lot of health, and that forces the Dorinthea either to keep their hand because they have a counter, so now they're very invested into keeping that counter, which could be like a trap for Dory, right? To be like, I have one counter, I really want to keep this. So they take all the damage, and on your turn as opponent, if you just able to completely block it out, then they could maybe IP penalize themselves by keeping cards in hand. They were hoping to go over or go around, they couldn't because you block with D-React with equipment. It stops their plan, so that could be very punishing.
Yeah, equipment usage is very, very important. Being able to deny reprise at key points is extremely effective against Dorinthea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other things that comes to mind?
Yeah, play a lot of ward things that deny a reprise value. You know.
Yeah, play Enigma. If you're
Yeah.
really struggling against Dorinthea, play Enigma, and then you'll be fine.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I think that's a pretty good summary about how to deal with Dorinthea.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, she's not super popular, so I don't think you're going to encounter too many of them. Oh, I will mention one of the best things that you could do, and this is why I dislike bringing Dorinthea to like Pro Quest RTNs, is scout the room. If you know Dory's on Dawnblade for sure, you got an advantage. So, or if you know they're on Hatchets or Decimator, that just helps so much. And that's one of the issues with bringing Dawnblade Dory. It's like if they know,
if your teammates can help you like scout and find out like, oh, this person's on this weapon, it takes out a lot of the mystery from like fighting a blind Dory. Because if you sideboard incorrectly, it's very punishing because you expected hatchets. Maybe you don't bring D-Reacts because you're not really expecting it, but then you fight a Dawnblade Dory, you're like, oh no, this is so punishing.
Yeah.
But if you already know they're a Dawnblade, you just bring in your D-Reacts and other prevention effects, and then you have a much stronger advantage into that deck.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think that's a pretty good summary, and I think we did a pretty good job, going over everything. Nixie, I just want to thank you for coming on and being part of this very first episode of AtoZ.
Of course.
It's always a great pleasure to talk Dory with you. Okay, so let's just wrap up things a little bit. So, the Card Guys are sponsored by fabric.gg. You can go check them out. You can go adjust the deck a little bit with the recommendations on their website. We're also sponsored by Magnolia Games. Huge shout out to them for sending us to events like US Nats and the Calling in Tampa, and also to Dragon Shield. Nixie, I know that you've made some custom sleeves through Dragon Shield. I have too.
I did.
So if you guys are going to events and you see us, you can come up and say hi. We'll hand you a sleeve, and you could put your hero or your Dawnblade, or you can't put your Decimator Great Axe in it. We won't allow that. But you could put Bolton in there, and
any other warrior. Yeah,
any other warrior would be good. Okay, so Nixie, how can people find you?
They can find
not
me...
your home address, but like your YouTube.
Dox myself.
Yeah, don't dox yourself.
Find me on YouTube at Nixie-GLHF for some gameplay videos and deck tech analysis.
Yes, he does a lot.
I'm also on Twitter at its_Nixie, and also on the Flesh and Blood Purple Discord. I'm just looking on there a lot of times. So
we're definitely we do pop up and say hi in the Purple Discord quite a bit. So okay, well, I think that kind of wraps things up. Thank you guys for watching this very first episode of Fab AtoZ, brought to you guys by TheCardGuyz. Please leave some feedback below about the episode. This is going to be a process. We're going to produce 30 more episodes. So if there's something that you want to see, please let us know. If there's particular guests that you want to see, we're going to try to bring on 31 unique guests from the community. So if you have any suggestions, or you want to be a guest for a particular hero, I don't know if we know any Betsy mains. So maybe we need to find one of those. So yeah, that would be great. So yeah. All right, this has been Josh Lau with Nixie. We'll see you guys later. Take care.
See you guys.